Okay, so a very good morning to all of you. Just let us settle down for a moment. So let me see the comments also here. So we'll begin with the part we had completed, and I think a couple of you also wanted to also take up a question before we start. So I'll take up a question from the previous topic itself. Now in the previous topics we have already done the locality factors in good detail. Okay, so from that locality factors, let me first take a question so that you also know how to generate points and how to write answers, and after that we move into the site index. Okay, so these are the two parts that we want to do right now. After that we go to another interesting topic from which we always see questions, that is climax. Okay, which is climax, subclimax, the overall topic of forest succession, and then after we go into the aspects of regeneration. Okay, how regeneration is done, what are the methods, and from the initial lectures I have told you that right from natural regeneration to artificial regeneration, these are some aspects that we are aware about. Okay, so one by one, the very first question that we want to talk about, and here also I'll give you certain points, those of you who are also watching live and let's say we're going to attempt the question, the initial 1 minute I'll give to you to try to brainstorm. Okay, what are the points that you can have, and I'll tell you some points that for questions related to forests, some points you can always think about. Okay, now the question that we have for us, I'll firstly read it out. The regulation of solar radiation gives a powerful tool to the forester. Regulation of solar radiation gives a powerful tool to the forester. Okay, they may say explain, they may say justify. So based on this you have to try to attempt your answer, right? So here I'll just initially give you, so if you have any points, if you're live, you can also mention the points that you are thinking about. The point for us to focus on is regulation of solar radiation gives a powerful tool to the forester. Now when you're thinking of a forester, okay, of course think about forestry and broadly think about silviculture. So don't limit your answer only to one aspect. Okay, that you say, okay sir, this will help in canopy management, and then you only talk about canopy management in the entire answer, right? Here we have to try to differentiate and tell the examiner that yes, even by the regulation of radiation, that yes, we can manage the canopy, no doubt, we can manage the stand density, and with that overall silvicultural management can be done. Okay, so one by one we will talk about it, and directly you have to hit the nail on the head here, that what all can be done. So there are some points that I'll outline and we can expand on those points. Okay, so one obvious point can here be the management of canopy. Okay, in fact if we say, so for example, let's say these are some different types of forests. Now the radiation is going to affect the growth also. Okay, and because of that, howsoever dense or narrow or in what form the canopy we want can be managed into how the solar radiation component is going to be managed from that, right? So this is going to be a direct consequence, right, that canopy management can be done. Okay, other than that, the stand density can also be managed. Okay, remember when we had done the classification of forests, we had talked about stands. The stands can be even, the stands can also be uneven. Both have their own positives or let's say advantages or disadvantages. Okay, so in the same manner when we say stand density, okay, the stand density is also going to be an important part. Okay, which is going to help us. Okay, so even in certain timber related plantations, stand density can also be used. This can also be manipulated, right? Then with forest, one general point you can always mention overall is this will also help you manage the microclimate. In the previous class we had also seen how microclimate is connected, be it air temperature, be it soil temperature, be it humidity that is there in the air, okay, to the other kinds of, let's say, nutrition, or let's say the nutrient that is going to be available, okay, so all which is related to the soil or the edaphic factors. So even microclimate is going to play an important part, okay. Then the radiation, if you are able to manipulate and if you are able to overall regulate, okay, we will also be able to manage and then understand okay the rotation period, which directly would be linked to the forest management part of it. So here, while the question you are attempting it in paper 1A, nobody is stopping you to add elements from paper 1B and even from paper 2A as well, okay, because you are given the role of a forester. So also think from paper 2A, that is the forest management point of view, okay, that what all things can be done here so as to regulate the solar radiation finally, which helps in which actually helps the forester, okay. So this is also one point that you can overall mention here, okay, in addition to the points that we've already seen. Fine. Now additionally we can also say that here the choice or the selection of species, okay, because see, different species have different light requirements, okay, they will have different crown. Remember, with crown, the dominated, the suppressed, the different, okay, crown densities, etc. Because ultimately this is going to also help or give the forester the species, the choice of species selection, okay. So be it in terms of the availability or overall related to crown also, okay, or certain species like we saw examples like light demander, shade demander, or shade bearer. So there also overall solar radiation is going to play an important role. Fine. So even that can be a part that can be mentioned here in your points, okay. Just a second, let me use this to illustrate this better, okay, right. So even this can be mentioned here. So these 5 points can be some direct points that are related. These are your major points that you can write on the spot. But in addition to this, okay, we can even say that if we are able to regulate soil radiation, solar radiation, now some indirect point also, if soil, this is better managed, even the biodiversity, okay, conservation or biodiversity enhancement can also happen because of regulation of proper availability of solar radiation. You can give an example of, let's say, the teak plantations in Kerala, in central India, okay, or in the northern parts or Nilgiris, where if the solar radiation is properly well regulated and managed, this will enhance the biodiversity in that region, okay. For example, when we give the example of Western Ghats, if I'm talking of overall the region of Nilgiri or the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, so proper regulation of solar radiation also helps, okay. And then soil can be another related part. So one, this is biotic, this is edaphic. Notice how we are playing along, okay. Climate I've already taken, that is the climatic part. Even if you want to add, so solar radiation is going to in this sense also help overall, okay. And last part, again I'll now link paper 2B, okay, is the overall quality of the forest, which means the quality of timber, quality of non-timber forest products, okay. So last part we can say the forest product quality can also be improved and enhanced by regulation of solar radiation. Fine. So notice, see, again for our reference, you don't have to write this in the exam, but this part is inspired from paper 2B. Forest management part is from paper 2A, inspired again. The soil biodiversity, while we also do this in paper 1A, but these are also explicitly outlined in paper 1B. Okay, and other basic part, stand density, canopy management is also something we see, but these are also done in far more detail in paper 2A as well. So now when you write this answer, you will see around 8 odd points which will cover the lot of breadth, okay, throughout the syllabus. Fine. So again, this is just to give you an illustration or an idea. So whenever you are going to write points, okay, and the people who are also online here, and let's say if you are seeing the previous questions, your first job is to brainstorm. Okay, no issues if you're only able to let's say get 4 or 5 or 3 points. Okay, if you're struggling, you can also just drop me a message that what other points can be mentioned. But if you're able to now systematically generate points, and with each, let's say, topic done, you should be now familiar with that topic's vocab. Okay, so that is how, let's say, if you do not use the terms like canopy or the stand or these microclimate rotation, then the answer will become very generic. Or let's say you only talk about biodiversity, soil. Fine. So again, notice here what is the constituent of the answer. We have tried to have 3 things. 1, we tried to have a multi-dimensional answer covering all the aspects. Second, we have tried to use better vocabulary. Okay, and third, here also, if there is a scope, we can mention, let's say, certain species varieties. Now let's say if I write teak, you can mention Tectona grandis along with a basic diagram of how solar radiation can help. Okay, so this is just one example, right? Again, the whole array of previous year questions is available with you. Try to do this one by one. You don't have to write the entire answer. Focus initially on brainstorming, and wherever you can use vocabulary, okay, or the examples. Fine. So that is how you write your answers. Here you don't have to have a explicit introduction or a conclusion. Of course, you can just maybe write that in one line, how solar radiation is an important component, and then start writing the points and explaining them. Fine. So this is how we will understand. And again, as I move along, I'll give you certain more examples, okay, of answer writing. That also is an important part. I hope by now the people who have watched the lecture 1, 2 and 3, even if you've started right now, you still have ample amount of time. The point is, okay, try to put pen to the paper. Okay, if you write an attempt, you will be getting better at it with due time. Okay, now this is at the very outset what we wanted to see and discuss. Okay, for the students, again, those who are going to attempt the Indian Forest Services exam of 2024 can reach out to us in terms of any assistance related to the Forestry Optional. Okay, the people who are also preparing for 2025 or 2026, if there is anything we can help you out with our courses, let's say the foundation courses, etc., you can also reach out. And additionally, we also have, now this test series will be specific for the people who are going to write the exam in 2024. Now for each test, this is the schedule, and you can follow the detailed schedule from our website or the Telegram channel. So this is something you don't want to miss out. All right. Now we were talking about the silviculture general part here. So here let us go into the part. So we had discussed this part of microclimate in the previous class. Okay, this particular multi-dimensional diagram also, and the linkages we have also tried to understand. Okay, and then of course this was a question where I just briefly touched upon. Now this is also one question that also gives us another opportunity to try our hands also and understand how we can attempt this part. Okay, what are the different factors that are governing the successful reintroduction of exotics. Okay, now the moment I say exotics, let's say an exotics like eucalyptus comes to mind. Okay, now when we say these are exotics, of course these are non-native, and we have different species of eucalyptus also, by the way. Now let's say the common species was native to Australia. So now if we are going to introduce any of these exotics, what are going to be the different governing factors, right? So like we have discussed here also, the basic framework is going to be similar. Okay, let's say if I write down the factors essential. So the factors that are going to be essential include, we have to take into account the climate. Okay, and within climate also we can mention certain points. We can talk about edaphic, which are the soil related points. Okay, we can also talk about topographic, okay, and we can also then mention about biotic. And in each points you will be able to mention that these are the different factors which are governing the successful reintroduction of exotics. Now this part by now I'm pretty sure for most of you is going to be clear, but here there are some specifics also that you should have in your answer. It is the specifics where I just want you to just write a couple of points, right? So that also is going to overall help, right? So we are discussing about this particular part. So here just a couple of examples that you can write down, because again we are discussing about eucalyptus, okay. And so first part here, when we are introducing eucalyptus or any of the exotic species, right? So here overall, first of course we should have the knowledge, okay, and then we should also be able to understand what are the basic factors, because again in different parts of India there are factors that have to be taken into account, okay. So our answer should reflect this part also, that yes, we know that here for both these parts what are the things that are essential to be taken into account, okay. So here just a couple of lines we will write, so that this also part is also easy, let's say well understood, and you are able to do this well, fine. So the very first part is, for example, you can write down with an example that in eucalyptus plantations, care should be taken to ensure, in the eucalyptus plantations care should be taken to ensure that appropriate knowledge of climatic factors is undertaken. Appropriate knowledge of these climatic factors is undertaken. Okay. Now one by one, first example, Casuarina equisetifolia, or let's say I'll write down some of the examples here. We're talking of overall the exotics or the plantations. Okay, the very first example is this example. You'll see overall for these are a good example of coastal plantations, okay. Casuarina equisetifolia or the Casuarina plantations, these are, remember, for this is for our understanding, these are the coastal plantation. Okay, so just one line you will write for this. Casuarina has found a niche in coastal areas of Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, where it helps in stabilizing the sand dunes. Okay. Now this point directly tells us that what are the different factors which are important for the reintroduction. In this case, what we are saying, that we need to know the niche. Okay, niche is a keyword that you have already read in your environment. Okay, that is the unique functional role of a species. If we know exactly what is the niche of a species, we will be able to grow it as well. Okay, so that is the first part that we understand, that Casuarina plantations, and this is an example you can use across multiple papers. And again, my tip always is that throughout India, be it, let's say you have to have an example for arid conditions. Two prominent examples we have seen many a times. One can be any of the acacia species. One can be, let's say, Prosopis cineraria. Fine, that can be arid or semi-arid conditions, right? Waterlogged conditions, you can have example of mangroves. Okay, remember the Rhizophora mucronata, Sonartia alba, Okay, Avicennia species, Avicennia marina. Coastal areas, you can have examples of Casuarina. Fine. So now slowly and steadily you have to put these portions, and again timber, two examples constantly. We are seeing the example in the case of Central India and in the case of Western Ghats, and specifically let's say the Kerala part. Okay. So slowly and steadily you'll have an idea about what to be written. Okay. So that is how you can move ahead and go about it. Okay. Then another example, and this is a common example that I was talking to you about. The second example we'll take up is the eucalyptus example, and you can write here of course that eucalyptus, or bracket in the bracket, which is native to Australia. Now this has been introduced and it has been able to very much adapt to the Indian conditions and very much rapidly thrive and grow. Okay. So eucalyptus, that is native to Australia, has been successfully introduced in many parts of India, has been successfully introduced in many parts of India due to its adaptability to various habitats. Okay, due to its adaptability. Okay, that is one part here. Another part we can talk about overall. Okay, let's say the case of Prosopis juliflora, and all these are examples for us. Okay, now in this case what is seen, now this is a kind of an example which has become negative. Okay, so there is a term known as exotic species. Now these exotic species can also be harmful to the ecosystem. When they do that, then we know a term known as invasive alien species. That means a species can be alien, which means it is not native, but invasive means when its population rapidly multiplies and it puts the population of native species into threat. Okay, so that is how you can write about Prosopis juliflora. So you can write down overall one line. Introduction of Prosopis juliflora. Introduction of Prosopis juliflora in arid conditions. In arid conditions. Now see, it was introduced to absorb the excess moisture. There was a lot of water logging in, and in fact in cases of Gujarat also, aerially also the Prosopis juliflora let's say was sprinkled and thrown, so that overall it can take up the excess water that is coming in from the shores. It was able to do so. It was even able to improve the soil conditions initially, but the negative part was that it became invasive. Okay, so now the question says, now that is how, and by the way, Prosopis, everybody who has prepared for prelims knows it, this answer. Okay, eucalyptus also you would have known that eucalyptus, here also it has adapted. True, in many parts of India in plantations we use it, but here also the issue can also be it takes up a lot of water. So the question, when the question is asking you what are the different factors that need to be taken into account for successful reintroduction or for introduction of exotic species, we must be able to mention all these important factors. Okay, so for Prosopis you can write down, it is becoming invasive in certain areas. Okay, so that is something that you can write. Now 2 or 3 points will always remain when we are talking about climate. So now of course you will mention that appropriate temperature range, okay, appropriate precipitation factors, availability of nutrients and soil conditions. This has to be there, otherwise the plantation etc. would not be able to survive. Okay, so while I have given you some specific points here, it does not mean that we will not write down the basic points that you should also write. So for example, if we take down climatic factors, we can keep on adding. For example, appropriate temperature, we should know this, otherwise the crop the plantation may fail. Okay, based on its water requirements, precipitation, this also is something that we have to take into account. Okay, and additionally which season Okay, what is the season, which is very important. Okay, now here overall also you can mention example. Overall, one example I'm giving you here, that is something you can write down. Let's say we take the example of the populus species. Okay, so there is poplar, that is known as populus deltoides. Again we'll put a line. So here just one line you can write down. This is again an example. Populus deltoides, poplar has been successfully introduced. Populus deltoides, poplar has been successfully introduced in the Indo-Gangetic plains. It has been successfully introduced in the Indo-Gangetic plains. Okay, although poplar had become an issue in Jammu and Kashmir, because then when the pollens were airborne, it used to cause a lot of respiratory problems. There also it had become invasive. Okay, but overall we can say that it has also adapted well to the different conditions. Okay, so that is one part you can talk about it. Overall one example. Other things we will know, what are the, let's say, factors. So there are also biological factors, right from whether there will be a symbiotic association, whether there will be competition. So all those parts have to be in the answer. That is something we've already seen. Fine. So not elaborating on it, but I'm assuming that you will be writing this. Okay. See, now remember, I know that all these 4 factors you will write. Okay. But there are a couple of more factors. Remember, in our diagram, in the locality factors, we had also mentioned human as well as the technical or the management part. Okay. Because technical or the management part also shows how good your command is on paper 2A as well. So try to write that also. These parts are equally fine, no issues in that. But here we'll also try to mention the aspects of how well the management is. Okay. So that is one part I'll just make you write. Okay. So in the management factors, okay, here how good is the seed collection, how good is the, let's say, the management of the nursery, okay, how good overall is the research and monitoring going on. Fine. So 2 additional factors in addition to the 4. One, you can talk about the socio-economic factors, where we think about the people involved. Okay. And again, this is not limited only to this answer. Let's say if it is related to any other species overall, you can mention these points. And then these are management related. In management, right from the aspect of seed collection, okay, to the nursery, to the aspects overall related to, okay, overall silviculture. Okay. So here all these aspects can be written, which will be a part of management. Okay, which means monitoring what we are doing, how much monitoring is being done, how much, let's say, tending operations. Okay, all these things can be a part of management here, right? And in the socio-economic factors, we can say how viable this is going to be. Okay, we are seeing the economic viability, impact on, let's say, the local population, etc. All these factors will play an important role. And when we say local, so again, if we can explore the aspects of, let's say, community engagement, involvement, that can also be there. Okay. Now, in case you're wondering, there are too many points in this question. Again, notice you don't say, for example, for what are the factors. So again, if you're able to have these 4 dimensions, and within those dimensions 2 points each, and perhaps these 2 dimensions also 2 points each, you will have across multiple dimensions points across. Okay, followed by some of the examples. I think I've gave you 4 examples: Populus deltoides, Prosopis juliflora, Eucalyptus, Casuarina equisetifolia. Okay, this is more than enough to build an answer, right? So I don't think this should now bother you. You now have enough, let's say, to address, okay, enough parts to write the questions like this. And again, these are all cues for you. So in case you've not yet attempted, take some help from the points I've given you. Try to again write. In case if you want to share, the number is already shared with you, 93191 78775. You can directly send your answers to get the feedback. And again, more applicable for the people who are giving the mains this year. Okay. So let's say if you just want to speak or overall get an overview, you can let me know. We'll have a look at, right? Now let's talk about, now this is a very important part, okay, that is site quality. Now site specific planning, the previous question related to this we've already done in the previous class, okay. So that question you can see from here. In this, all you had to know was site specific planning. All you have to expand is on the factors of locality. So now you will see it is related to so many different areas, right? We are now more focused on this particular part, site quality, okay. Now first we'll see some important definitions. I'll also show you case studies, and if you get a question on site quality, this is a diagram we have to draw. We'll also understand what this means, how the variation happens in the site index, okay, and then why is the height even taken into account. So again we'll have a look at these factors here, okay. So one by one we'll just discuss some of the points related to this, okay. The point is the site quality. Now whenever we read about the different factors which are affecting the locality, okay, you may just only focus on one factor, okay, but the point is in site quality the combination of all these factors has to be taken into account, okay. So here it is not only the topographic or the biotic or the edaphic, okay, or the climatic, it is a combination of all these factors, right? Just to give you an example here, and then we'll go about this particular part. So for example, let's say we are in Western Ghats, okay, and we are in the teak plantations in Kerala, let's say, okay. Now if an area has very good soil, okay, well drained soil, proper precipitation is there, proper sunlight availability is there, right, all the factors or the check boxes are ticked, that is one, okay, let's say I say that as one, versus an area which has poor soil quality, poor drainage, radiation or solar radiation is not good enough, so I say this as 2. I can compare both of them through this site index, which is a measurement or which tells me about the site quality, okay. So all we are doing here, if you see this, okay, so here seeing the height, age, the breast height age, this is in years, this is the total height, okay, and we are plotting it and we get a site index, okay. Now if you note here, there are different classes that I mentioned based on whatever the score is, for example, right. So for one we had said here all the conditions, let's say, are good, again for our understanding, and here all the things are very average or poor, okay. So here the site quality will be higher or the site index will be higher, here it will be lower, as we can also understand from the diagram itself, okay. So what you see here, a very low mark will tell us it is a class 5 site, a very high mark will tell us the site quality is also good, the site index is also good, fine. So first of all, this is how this is overall outlined for our understanding, okay. Also we'll go through this one more time, but first of all let us see the definition, and this is the definition you have to exactly write in the exam. Notice the use of keywords here. So what is site index, or some cases site quality index? It is the average total height that, notice what we are saying, dominant and co-dominant, that dominant and co-dominant trees in fully stocked, even aged stands. Now stands based on the age criteria can be even aged or uneven aged. We are talking about these even age stands, okay. They will attain at key age, okay. So it is the average total height that these trees will attain at a certain key age, okay, and it is overall. So this is a classification overall of a forest land in terms of the capacity to grow, okay. So here overall, what are the keywords that we are seeing so far in site index? The main keyword that we have seen overall is what is the average total height we are going to see, okay, of dominant, remember dominant, remember dominated, and remember suppressed, okay. So dominant here and Co-dominant, these are D1 and D2. I hope you remember here. This was 5/6. The other part was 3/4. Okay. And then the suppressed would be around half. Right. So this is something we had already drawn in C in the initial classes. Okay. We had tried to also mention. So here the site quality index is going to give us a very good understanding. Right. Now, please note here we are talking of the total height. Okay. And based on that, there is also something known as this Douglas fir site index. And we've also seen, just for our reference, how these site classes are signified. So again, if you get a question or like this in the exam, just mention the definition. And this is a diagram. You don't have to be very accurate here. Just remember the overall years versus the height that is measured in feet. So there is a relation that is overall plotted, and which overall gives us the index age in this particular part. Okay. So that is how we can go ahead and understand what is happening in this particular case here. Okay. Now here also, to make you, let's say, understand this even better, there are a couple of points that I just want you to understand in this part, right? So here overall, if I have to just mention, so there are two things that I'll tell you about this. Okay. And here we will just take some examples so that this part you can easily understand via examples, that when is a site overall good and when it is not. Okay. So in case somebody is online, if you have a doubt, you can also let me know. I think, okay, hello to the people who have just mentioned a hello here. Okay. So the definition part, I think we are able to understand. Okay. Now just a couple of lines you can write down. Okay, and this is overall, I'm giving you case study. Let's say we'll take up a case study overall. So here just one line. I gave you a simple example. Let me just mention, and then you can understand, and then we'll also understand why do we take height overall. Okay. So let's write down the case study of Tectona grandis, the case study of teak, or let's say Tectona grandis in the Kerala plantations. Okay, the teak plantations in Kerala we'll have a look at. So here you'll write that SQI, that is the site quality index, is an important parameter. Okay, SQI, because how well is the plantation doing, you would get to know it from SQI, site quality index. Okay, that is the heading that we've written. So here just a couple of lines. Now first point, areas with higher annual rainfall, areas with higher annual rainfall and mean annual temperature, so both higher annual rainfall and higher mean annual temperature showed higher SQI. So this part directly tells you that how climatic factors play an important role. Achha, before I tell you the issues, I'll also, let me mention it here itself, right? The first part in the teak case study part, we are saying how climate plays an important role, that climatic factors are important. Okay, so in, let's say, Tectona grandis, if we get proper temperature and if we also get proper annual precipitation, that also means higher SQI, site quality index. Second point, sites, now that is the edaphic part. Let's say if I talk about the soil, how good the soil is. See, invariably I'll talk about all the four factors. Okay, so here just one line. Sites with deep, well drained soils, or let's say well drained alluvial soils, sites with deep, well drained soils show higher SQI values, which can be, let's say, class 1, class 2. What is class 1, class 2? These are higher values. Okay, as opposed to shallow eroded soils. Now these will be class 3, class 4. Okay, so that is how you can write here. Now this is a good line to write here in biotech. I'll exactly how I'm telling you, you can write it. See, you have to have a plantation. Now if there is a less competition between the trees or between the species, they will grow farther. Otherwise, they have to compete for the same limited resources. Okay. So how do we manage the canopy? How do we manage the understory? These are all important factors, right? So just one line for this, the biotic factors you can write. Okay. So exactly, stands with controlled, like I just write it here, stands with controlled understory. Okay, stands with controlled understory vegetation and proper, okay, spacing. You can even mention canopy management, etc. These are all keywords that we see. Okay, in the first question, what we had seen: canopy management, stand density management. I am using the same thing. You can even mention proper spacing or proper stand density. If this is done properly, the competition will be less. They will grow further, which means better SQI, site quality index. That will be better SQI. Okay. Okay. And last can be the topographic factors, where we can just mention the case of that how a normal slope, which you can write that as the mid slope, as opposed to the valley bottoms, okay, or very steep slopes. In steep slopes, the SQI will not be very high, so it is the mid slopes which will have better SQI. Okay, that is one thing we can talk about. Okay, so overall, you know that how site selection and how all these factors will play an important part, okay, in this particular aspect here. Right. Now, before we go to the issues part, let me just also tell you why are we going for the height. Okay, site index, again we'll see this in we understand this in more detail in the forest mensuration paper 2A. What you are doing, again, you are going to see the quality of a forest. Okay, and why do you want to know that? You want to get the maximum return from the timber protection, timber plantations, right? So what you are doing, you are measuring the height of the trees at a specified age, and you have a generally the base age is around 50 years. But here please note we are talking about the even stands, fine, and we will see the potential height growth over a period of time. Now in this case, what you are doing, we are going for height, okay, because this is going to be a very much reliable indicator of the site's productivity and the quality of growing conditions. Later on, when you read about mensuration in more detail, we will see all things like diameter at breast height, okay, and right from the visual part, how this can overall be helpful. Okay, that why in general that we are going for site. So here also, if you see, we are going for total height overall. There is an index age of 50, that now you understand that overall measuring the height of a tree typically at a base age. Base age, for example, here is 50 years. So based on that, we will try to assess the quality of the forest sites for timber production. So if you understand the whole mechanism behind this, then you will understand that yes, that is why we have taken height. But if we have taken height, there will be certain issues that will always be there, because see, even if we measure anything, let's say through a scale, through a vernier caliper, or from a screw gauge, in any of the instrument or any mechanism, there will always be certain errors. Errors can be because of humans, because of the formula that sometimes that we use, there is a error percentage or a tolerance. Here also there may be certain errors that have to be accounted for, and it may not be the most perfect thing. Okay, so here of course there are certain issues in this. Okay, now what are the issues? Okay, the biggest issue is age dependency. So first we will write down a couple of issues, and then one by one I will explain this to you. Okay, second, this is going to be very much species specific, which means it cannot be done across all the species. There is going to be a variation here. Okay, the stand density is also going to cause certain issues here. Okay, for example, let's say if we have a very dense canopy, okay, so there will be a lot of competition, and because of that competition, if the growth is not appropriate, the site quality may also go down, okay. So this is also a challenge here, okay. And other than that, because of these issues, it cannot be applied everywhere, so we can say it has a limited applicability, okay. Plus there can be certain errors in measurement. These are some of the major points, and if I can even go further, even there can be certain mutations or some genetic variations that can even be another issue which may lead to further variations in the measurement overall, okay. So now one by one we'll have a look at. We start with the age dependency part, okay. For age dependency, just one line we'll write, and here if you have these very crisp notes, that will be very much helpful. For age dependency, you can just write, in young plantations, it is difficult to accurately predict the future height growth, okay, that how much would it grow. Now again, an example to give you here. So for certain, let's say if the overall age is here 50 years, that is the base index age. For some, the rotation period is going to be very less. So in very young plantations, we cannot totally exactly predict how much would they grow over a period of time, okay. So that also is a challenge, okay. So here just please write down in the example, because we have taken the example of, let's say, teak plantations in Kerala, okay. So please write down, for example, in teak plantations. Now for you, teak has to be Tectona grandis. We've already established this multiple times. For teak plantations in Kerala, the SQI predictions made at age 10, the SQI age predictions made at age 10 may not accurately reflect the site quality at, let's say, age 30 or 40 or even 50 years. So age dependency is a problem, okay, that it is not easy to predict at young ages. Second thing you can write is site or overall species specificity, okay. Now I'll just give you one example. For example, if I'm talking about central India, in central India, let's say we go for the measurement or we do the assessment for Sal. Sal for us here is Shoria robusta. So whatever we calculate for Sal in central India would not be applicable to the other species of teak in South India, okay. So species specificity is also a challenge. And second point also ties with the fourth point, that there is overall a limited applicability here, okay. So you will write this point overall as the SQI values developed for Sal. The SQI values developed for Sal for us is Shoria robusta, in central India cannot be directly compared with the teak varieties of southern India. Cannot be directly compared with the teak varieties of southern India, okay. So I hope point number 1 and point number 2 is clear. Fine. Third is stand density, okay, stand density. For stand density, what you can write, the example I gave you, you can write down, in dense bamboo plantations, there will be high competition, okay, because if there's a dense plantation, the stand density of course is going to be dense. This is going to lead to higher competition, which may also potentially restrict certain growth and which will also have a lower SQI, okay. So in dense plantations, competition might lead to reduced height growth, competition might lead to reduced height growth. Okay. And then of course there are issues that this is limited applicability. Okay, because see, you're again talking about even stands. What about mixed stands? What about uneven stands? Okay, so within an area also it is difficult to implement it, because there is a lot of terms and conditions, as we have seen from the definition also. Okay, plus there can be certain errors in measurement. Okay, we can write there can be certain errors in measurement. Okay, so here just one line: inaccurate age determination. Inaccurate age determination of, let's say, regular or even irregular sal forests can lead to problems. Okay, so overall there are 5 points, right from age dependency, species specificity, stand density, limited applicability, and the errors in measurement. That also is something that we can talk about when we are talking about this whole part, that what are the issues in the site quality index that are faced. Fine. So the Douglas fir site index is also one thing that we overall see. Okay, so I hope you have seen this whole part here. You also understand what to make the best use of it, why height is overall taken, okay, and what are the issues that can be raised because of this. Fine. So this is also a part that we do in overall locality factors. I hope that also gives you certain good understanding here. Okay, now we move to another very interesting topic, which is known as the forest succession. And every year you will see a question from this topic. So again, we'll do this. By the way, the basics of these topics we also do in environment. Okay, so whenever you do environment and ecology, this is again a very it's a very basic topic that we read about. So here, from our perspective of forestry optional also, we'll have a quick look at. Fine. So here, of course, we should know what this is, then what are the different types. This is important to know. And after the types, it is equally important to know what are the important theories behind it. Now, while there are many theories that we can highlight, we can limit this to some of the 4 prominent theories. If you remember even these 4, that is good enough. Okay, and then of course in between this we can also see what are the stages that happen in the forest succession. That can also be a point that for us to understand. Okay, so what are the types of succession, what are the stages, what are the different theories involved, and then the application overall. Okay, so these are some of the overall points that we can see and link. Okay, so what is forest succession? Okay, a very simple part. Just like in history we have battles. Okay, there are battles of succession, one king killing the other king, and how, and not just even killing, how the throne etc. is passed along. That is the history part of it. In environment, what happens? For example, when we have a bare rock, and when I say bare rock, that is a rock where we did not even have soil. On that, how in the very initial part you will see some lichens coming in, then perhaps some mosses, then some herbs, shrubs, slowly steadily, and finally you would have something that is known as a proper full forest that you see. Okay, and this takes a lot of time overall. Okay, so from the very bare rock, the whole, let's say, bare rock, lichens, to many other intermediate stages, to the final climax stage. Okay, bare rock, lichens, all these in between are known as the seral stages, or these are also known as the intermediate stages. Okay, and finally you have something known as climax. So that means in between you have something known as, and this was asked in 2023 also, previously also, subclimax, which is nothing but the intermediate stages. Okay, okay. Now again we'll go through some of the infographics here. Again, this is a question where you have to draw a diagram. Okay, if you get a question, you cannot miss on it. I'm mentioning a diagram here specifically. I'll show you a lot of diagrams what can be drawn, but again this is something you cannot miss out on. Right, now what are the different types? Now the types can be divided. Okay, now broadly speaking we can have around 3 types here. Okay, so for example, if there is a presence of any vegetation, if the vegetation existed or if the vegetation did not exist. So I'm just writing overall the presence of vegetation. Based on this we can have primary or secondary succession. Based on, let's say, the amount of water that is available, we can have again 3 different types, which can be, if there is too much of water, it is hydrarch; too less water, xerarch, or I think I should write that in the last. See, hydrarch is too much of water, too less water is xerarch, and in between we have something known as mesarch. Okay, so one, based on whether we had vegetation or not; second, whether how much water was available; and third, we can also say how was the succession done, autogenic or allogenic. Okay, so that is also how. So I'm just writing it here. The point is you should be able to consolidate all these things in one place. Okay, so I'm writing here itself autogenic and allogenic. The term auto means the succession was helped out by the native species or that area itself, whereas allogenic means the nearby surrounding areas also helped the succession to happen. Okay, so the third part can be segregated into agency. Okay, if it was done by the species there then itself, that is autogenic, whereas the other part is known as allogenic. Fine. So what have we seen so far here? The what part is what is the succession going on. Here it is important for you to draw a diagram, followed by what are the different types, right? Then what are the stages? We start right from nudation, where everything starts as a bare rock. We'll see the other stages are also. So also either through a mnemonic. Okay, try to remember the different stages. You start with nudation and you end up at stabilization. Stabilization is the climax. Climax community is the most stable. Okay, there is no more, let's say, stages coming in after the climax. So ultimately the whole process is from nudation stage to the stabilization stage. Okay, and then there are theories. Okay, I'll give you one example, and then of course we have total 4 theories. For example, there is a single or mono sorry, this is not molo, this is mono. The monoclimax or the monoclimatic theory. Okay, highlighting that there is only one factor that is influencing it, similarly countered by poly, which means multiple factors. Similarly we have an information theory here. Okay, so different people right from Tansley to Whittaker have been there who have mentioned the theories. In the optional, it is important that you remember the name of the theory and who propounded the theory. Okay, both things are equally important for you to understand. Okay, and then you see an application. Now application is important. For example, when we do mangrove, in mangroves also succession happens from the very basic stage to the final stage. So there are different stages that keep on happening in between. Okay, so that is just one part that you'll have a look at. Okay, Okay, so again, application part also we'll again understand. Fine. So if this part is clear to you, and again I'll show this to you in a mind map also, all the entire points that we've mentioned will be covered in just one slide. Okay, you have a diagram, you know what this is, what are the types, how can you segregate it, what are the stages, what are the theories, and where this is applied. All that you need to know about the topic. Fine. So let us talk about it now. Just a very simple diagram. Exposed rocks, you can have your bare rocks, you have lichens and mosses, and there is an evolution that happens right from the annual weeds that are present to the perennial weeds or the grasses, shrubs. Okay, by now we already know what is the difference between a herb, shrub, and a tree. Okay, beech or maple, broadleaf forest. So there is a evolution that has happened throughout. Okay, and that for us is important to understand how the evolution process takes place overall. Okay, so that is how we understand the evolution process. Okay, now a couple of points you will see, and this is what I want you to remember. The thing I showed you just now is what I am writing this as a mind map. Okay, if you remember this, your work is done. Okay, see, we'll try to have a look at all these part here. Okay, what are the different stages: nudation, invasion, competition, reaction, stabilization. Okay, so this also has been asked once in the previous question. That is why, what are the different stages, we should also be aware about it. Okay, this part has already been asked and is something we also cover. Subclimax, what this is. Okay, the different terms of section types here. Okay, and these are the four theories. Okay, you have a monoclimax theory given by Clement, polyclimax theory given by Tansley, information theory by Fosberg and Odom, and lastly the climax pattern hypothesis by Whittaker. Okay, this is already mentioned in the very first mind map. Okay, the causes, etc., what is the initiating cause, continuation cause, stabilization cause, we will go into it. Okay, we'll understand. Fine, and this is how you overall get to know. Fine. Now let me go back to where we were and where we started. Okay, again come back. So what is the definition of this, what are the types, we'll also have a look at, what are the causes, what are the theories. I also showed you the name of the scientist, try to recall. Monoclimax, polyclimax, information, and climax. For this theory part I'll give you a very short dictation so that you are also thorough with the notes. For this part even the mind map is enough. So for this part there is a short mind map that I showed you. What are the different causes which lead to the ecological succession. Fine. Now just a couple of things for our understanding. This is something we already do in the environment part of it. So again this is going to be a quick revision for all of you, right? So what is succession? It's a series of progressive changes in the composition of ecological community. Notice we are talking about composition. Okay, this is one. This is the process by which the structure of the biological community evolves over time. That we've also seen. From a bare rock, ultimately lichens. Lichens is what? A symbiotic association of algae plus fungus. And then we finally move on to the climax community, which is the most stable, which is ultimately going to be a proper forest. Okay, so it is the structure of a biological community that happens. Okay, succession is directional. Okay, so in one direction it is going to go, right? There are multiple stages that happen in between. The stages are known as series. Okay, so these are the intermediate steps that happen in between. Okay, characterized by the presence of different communities. So what are series? Series are the different steps that happen in between. Fine. Then we can say the communities change gradually from one seer to the other. Okay, of course these are not totally distinct from one another, and ultimately they merge. Finally they end up becoming the most stable, that is the climax community. Okay, so remember these terms. For example, you start, okay, in the very beginning there are certain foundational species for which we use a term, the pioneer stage. Okay, followed by multiple intermediate stages, which is also defined as series. Okay, and this ultimately ends up as a climax. So this is again a simple part you can draw. Climax stage. In climax stage, you will have climax community. In the pioneer stage, you have the pioneer communities. The most prominent example of a pioneer community would be the lichens, for example. Okay, right. So again, one more line: succession will not go any further than the climax community. This is the final stage. The succession would not go beyond this part. Okay, so that is something we understand overall. Okay. Again, a simple example for you to draw in the exam. Fine. And by the way, now they have mentioned oak, okay, or beech. For oak, beech, I have given you the specific names also. Remember the altitudinal zonation of forest. Okay. For even the oak, remember quercus species we had discussed, juniperus species, etc. Right from exposed rock, lichens, okay, to multiple stages in between, be it herbs, shrubs, young forest, etc., which you can mention as series or intermediate stages. Okay. Finally, end with this keyword climax community overall with the forest. So this is one example you can draw easily in the exam. Okay, would not take much of the space, and you can easily do this. Okay. Now, again, the part I was showing you, these are the pioneer stages. Pioneer community is there. There is intermediate stage. Okay, and then there is the climax community. Any of these diagram which becomes easy to you, you can go through it. Now it will make more sense to you. For example, you see shade tolerant trees. If you remember the example of shade tolerant trees which we have already seen, write it on top of that. So examiner will directly know that you also know shade tolerant trees, you also know the examples of it, right? So again, wherever possible, if there is a stage to get marks, you don't have to miss out. Okay, this is either you can present in this one way, but an even better diagram is this, where show the stages in the lower side, show the different parts here, bare rock, lichens, shrubs, grasses, and shade tolerant trees, that there is a proper evolution which goes on. Okay. However, please note the this particular part says stages of primary succession. Now, using again our knowledge of prelims, we already know there are two successions that happen. If there is no vegetation that was there, here we start from a bare rock, there is no foundation as such. That succession is known as primary succession. Whereas if we already had a vegetation in the first place, okay, and there was a forest fire, there was some calamity, there was a problem, and after that the new vegetation came in. When the old vegetation existed, got wiped out, got destroyed, and after that, so that is known as secondary succession. And we know that the main difference between primary and secondary is that secondary succession takes very less time, whereas the primary takes a lot of time, right? So that is also how we will talk about in this manner. Okay, so in the stages of this succession, you can draw this diagram. Again, we come back to what we were discussing. Okay, what are the types of succession? So of course we have the primary succession, we have the secondary succession, that is based on whether the vegetation was there or not. Okay, then there is, in fact there is one thing that is not mentioned here, that is with respect to availability overall of water. On that front also we have seen three terms: mesarch, hydrarch, and xerarch. Okay, then you see autogenic, this is controlled by the biotic factors, component of that ecosystem. Biotic is the living part. Allogenic is abiotic factors. Okay, autotrophic, here autotrophs, which are the primary producers, they will initiate it. Okay, and this will happen in a medium that is rich in inorganic substances. You also have heterotrophic succession, it occurs in a medium that is rich in organic substances. So one is rich in inorganic, one is rich in organic. Okay, and three keywords that we had seen: hydrarch, okay, mesarch, and xerarch. Okay, xerarch of course means very less water, that is why you have zero coals, so zero sites in that area. Okay, so again that is how you can talk about. This is not very difficult, and I think I've added one part here so you can mention, like for example the nature of substratum will give you hydrarch, xerarch, mesarch, causes of succession autogenic, allogenic, plus we've also added autotrophic and heterotrophic. Autotrophic and heterotrophic nature of succession. Fine. So this is something overall that we have seen here. Okay, this is a diagram. By now I'm sure you now have an idea of how to draw it. Shade tolerant trees, at the end the climax community, okay, the intermediate species, and starting with the pioneer species, which of course we'll start with the lichens, okay, which invade a bare rock. These are the pioneer or the foundational species that we have, okay. And this is your secondary succession. Remember, in secondary succession we already had vegetation, okay, but perhaps because of, let's say, a forest fire or any human activities, excessive grazing, okay, or any volcano, etc., there was a let's say the vegetation was destroyed, and after that there was again new vegetation that came in. So to signify that, we use again a term that is known as secondary succession. That is the main part for you to understand and highlight here, okay. This was a part we were discussing, okay, in the plant succession, that you have hydrosphere, the hydro, meso, and the xero, okay. Now here, this is where you can write down that hydrosphere is, it is the succession that happens in regions, where the water is plenty. You have a lot of water. That water scarcity is not a problem, okay. The water is easily and abundantly present. For that, of course, we have examples like ponds, lakes, streams, swamps, okay. So ponds, lakes, streams, swamps are the proper examples of hydrosphere, okay. You also have an example of mesosphere succession, where the moisture conditions are adequate. This lies between the two. You have a hydrosphere, you have a mesosphere, you have a xerosphere, okay. In the xero, the moment you see the term XER, so xerophytes, okay, or xerophytes, these are all found in arid conditions or the desert like conditions, okay, where the presence of soil or moisture is less. Fine. So succession here starts when the moisture is present in minimal amount of water, which means here the water is going to be present in very less amount, okay. So keep that also on mind, okay. The xerosphere can be divided in few more parts. This is slightly more technical, okay. Litho means land, we know. Lithosphere, so lithosphere is if the succession starts on a bare rock, okay. You have a halosphere. With halosphere, remember halophytes, we say mangroves to be halophytes. Halo means saline, okay, they are saline tolerant species, okay. So the succession here starts on saline water, that is halosphere. And finally you have samosphere, P-S-A-M-M-O-S-E-R-E, samosphere. Samosphere is where it starts on sand, okay. The succession which starts here on sand here is the samosphere in fact. So that is one part for you to understand. So lithosphere, halosphere, samosphere, fine. Hydrosphere, mesosphere, xerosphere, that is something we have seen so far, okay. Now another point you have to remember are the stages. By the way, this has been asked in the optional, you should know. Nudation, invasion, competition, or let's say coaction, reaction, stabilization. First and the last you should remember, and then of course we'll try to remember the stages in between. Nudation, think from a nude rock or a bare rock, which is going to be invaded by something known as a lichen, okay. Followed by invasion, okay, competition, reaction, stabilization. So for this there is a entire steps that you have to follow. The 7 stages are there, okay. If you are able to remember this, excellent, okay. So you start with nudation, there is invasion, there is ecasis, NIEA, okay, and you have CRS, okay. So howsoever you want to remember it, NIE or ACRS, okay, or maybe Nike or ARCS, anything like that. There are 7 points, and because this has been asked, so we'll just spend some time here. What are the stages? By the way, most of the words are self-explanatory, okay. So we'll just have a look at this also. You start with the nudation, okay. Nudation is the development of a barren area, and here there is no form of life that is available, okay. Just think of a bare rock. In that bare rock, what would you have? You would have nothing. It is only after a period of time even the lichens start to come, and after that slowly steadily you will have the development of soil. Okay, so here it is again, simply think of a barren area. Okay, it can be due to the soil, it can be soil erosion, wind erosion, due to climate. So there can be a fire which leads to a barren area, it can be a storm or a hail. Okay, or even human factors like human activities, deforestation, overgrazing, etc. So nudation, remember, that is why you see nudation can happen because of climatic factors, topographic factors, biotic factors. Okay, so you now also know that these factors again and again you will be able to see. Okay, next is invasion. Okay, we already had seen a lot of foreign invasions, let's say in history. Similarly, you'll see if any species is going to invade that area, okay, perhaps they want to colonize that area, that is known as invasion. The species invade or reach a barren area, okay, that is simple invasion, right? And again, think about it. For example, you have bees, okay, you have different insects, you have different animals that help in pollination and seed dispersal. Okay, so from one area, a species or any of these parts can move to other area, right? So seed, spore, propagules of plant, etc., they reach a barren area by different agents. It can be air, okay, the pollens, etc., carried out by wind, okay, by water, or even other agents. That is part is known as migration. Okay, and then you have something known as echesis. Now this echesis may be new to you, so remember the term echesis. In fact, for echesis I'll put a star mark also known as establishment. Okay, so echesis is after them. See, in this diagram there are only 5 stages, but it is better to know all the 7 stages. Okay, echesis is when we reach this new area, and this is an area where the invasion has happened. Okay, successful establishment of the species happens. Okay, so here the species is now going to acclimatize or even adjust to those conditions. That part is known as echesis. Okay, and again remember, if the plant is able to establish itself well, further reproduction or the increase in population or the viability of that is going to happen here. So that is correct. Okay, fourth point is aggregation. Okay, so here the successful establishment of a species because of reproduction, increase in population, is known as aggregation. Okay, aggregation again means what we're doing. Aggregation means more things are being added, addition in a very simple term. Okay, so aggregation, or let's say, is there, again remember, there are ride aggregators, okay, like Ola or let's say Uber, etc. So aggregation is what? You take one part, you keep on adding more. How would that happen? This will happen only after something has got established. Something will get established only after it has invaded. It will invade a bare or a nude rock. So nudation followed by invasion, followed by establishment, followed by aggregation. Okay, then you have competition that will happen, right? That, like we see here, invasion, for example, competition. Competition is where you have more species that are coming in after getting aggregated. They will compete for the similar resources. Okay, this will lead to interspecies and intraspecific species competition. Okay, so be it water, nutrients, radiant energy, carbon dioxide, so there will be a fight for space and for the fight for nutrients also, right? There will be reaction. Okay, just like we see here. In fact, for this diagram, what you can do, the first two are very well outlined. There are 2 steps that are not mentioned here. One is the echesis part here. Okay, ECESIS, echesis, and the other is aggregation. And then of course competition is there, reaction is there, and stabilization. Reaction is, for example, the species is living in a part. Okay, so what they'll do, they will modify slowly and steadily the environmental conditions present in that area. Okay, the existing community, etc., is going to be replaced by another, and this part is going to happen again and again. So in reaction, what is going to happen when you see the term, you saw there are different several stages. So one part replaced by other, replaced by other, replaced by other. There are many intermediate stages in between. Okay, that part is known as the reaction. Okay, so think reaction from the point of view of different several stages. or the different intermediate stages in between. Okay. The last, of course, is the stabilization, which is the final stage, okay, the most advanced, and after this there is no more succession that will happen. This is the final establishment of the plant community, okay, and the establishment of this, it maintains the equilibrium, it is not replaced by others, of course, right. So this overall stage is known as the climax stage, okay. So this part is important. We need to understand what are the different stages that are present, okay. So where I have mentioned stages here, now try to quickly recall. I'll just mention, for example, stages. Just a second. Let's say I write stages like this. So what were the stages that we saw? Again, the more you recall, the better it is. We started with the nudation, followed by invasion, then echesis, also known as establishment, followed by aggregation, which is a simple word or overall related to the consolidation that is going to happen, okay. Then after this overall, this was followed by competition. If you do this once with full concentration, this sequence you will be able to remember, because it is following very logically what is going to happen, okay. So this competition, reaction and stabilization. These are all the stages. So stages also we have done, types we have understood, the basic what we know, diagram also we have seen. What is now left? Two things. One, here also there is a concept related to subclimax, and let's say this mind map is getting slightly more detailed. You can again after the lecture redraw it with all the proper details, but just try to do this in one page, okay. In case you are not able to do so, just drop me a message, we'll speak how to condense it for each of the topics. Again, one of the ideas that we have is to, if you're able to condense these things in one part, just in less than 5 minutes, entire topic you'll be able to revise, okay. I think this part is clear. Let's now talk about subclimax, and then we move to the 4 theories prominent. There are more theories than that, no issues like that, but we'll see this and then understand, okay. Now we are talking of subclimax, okay. So in subclimax there are few things, like now ecological succession, of course, is a process by which communities they change over time, okay, in response to the environmental factors, okay. And here what happens, of course, you know, there are different series of communities that will arise and they will change, okay. So we know a term overall known as the seral stages or the seral communities, okay. And ultimately what you have in the end would be known as something known as the most stable community, okay. The end is the most stable community. Now here along the way there may be certain subclimax communities, okay. So what are these? Just one part, remember, these are the intermediate stages, okay. These are the intermediate stages in the successional process, okay. That is one. And as you move along, see what happens when you start from the very basics to the last part here, the slowly and steadily the diversity and the complexity will increase, which is always a good sign. A sign of a stable community will be how diverse it is and how complex it is, because if any of these community of between gets eroded or gets killed or gets wiped out, the entire ecosystem should not suffer as a consequence, okay. So another keyword overall we see, the communities may be more diverse, they may be more complex than the earlier stages, right. Yet the stable, okay, but they are not yet the most stable or the self-sustaining, because ultimately the most stable we've already established is the climax community, okay. That comes at the end, that is the stabilization part, okay. So that is always going to be at the end. Okay. Now we'll take an example here of a forest. In a forest ecosystem, a subclimax community may be a mid-successional stage. Mid-successional stage. Now we'll see the use of keywords where dominant species are, what are the dominant species? Not the dominant or co-dominant trees. No, the dominant species here are small trees and shrubs rather than the large canopy trees. If you get a question on subclimax, again you can draw a diagram like this where you can show these. This is overall subclimax, the grasses, the shrubs, etc. in between, which is more complicated than the previous forms, but it is not as established as the most final form. Okay. So rather than the large canopy trees, because see, the large canopy trees will be the climax community, so they will eventually dominate at the end. Okay, which will eventually dominate the climax community. Okay. Now this subclimax community may persist for some amount of time. It can persist for even a larger amount of time. That would depend on the conditions overall, okay, and how stable that particular part is. But remember, this is not going to be as stable as the last stage. Okay, because last stage we know already is the climax community. Okay, so overall that is how we have structured our understanding around this topic. Fine. So what is subclimax is something we can understand here. Okay. Now here also, if we go before any further, in fact I have not mentioned here, I'll just take you to, we just have also a look at the previous year question here. So this is also something you can just look at. And again here, try to keep a habit of going through these questions. Okay, so we'll just have a look at one of the questions that was already asked related to the topic we are doing right now. And the more you go previous, you can also have a look at the other kind of units and questions here. Okay. By the way, this question you can now do. How does frost affect regeneration? What is frost hole? Okay. Very shortly, let's say questions like natural regeneration you will also be able to do. Okay. Just a second. Or maybe I think this is in one of the previous years. Just try to see, there is a question on the subclimax. Okay, so that is also one of the important questions that we can have a look at. Maybe I think the year is the other one. Okay, so the question is on overall subclimax community. Okay, and that can again be a question that you can attempt, or overall maybe in the upcoming class or either in the Telegram channel. I'll just mention that question here, so that you can again attempt it, or maybe if it is also mentioned in our slides, you will have a look at. Okay. Now this is a slightly advanced stage diagram which will require certain practice. Fine. Here you're talking again of a forest stage, woodland stage, reeds. Okay. So there are two diagrams. How the finally forest stage comes in, there are different submerged plant stage, okay, scrubs stages, etc., which can overall understand. So based on these two, first is the simple diagram that we can draw. Second is the stages, you should know all the 7 stages. Third is subclimax, you should know. Okay, this is something we also see. What are lichens, okay, forest, difference between pioneer as well as the climax community. Okay, now there are certain examples also, different types of climax, climatic climax, edaphic climax, pre-climax or post-climax, or even biotic climax. Okay, for each of the part we have certain examples. Okay, so for example we'll have a look at this. Okay, types of climax. Okay, so for example if we have climatic climax, okay, we can give example of sal, okay, in the North Indian tropical moist deciduous forest. This can be an example. Edaphic, which means related to soil part here. So again, for example, we say bamboo in the South tropical wet evergreen forest as an example of edaphic climax. Okay, pre-climax, let's say the teak forests in the evergreen forest of Tamil Nadu, tropical evergreen, we just saw the example of Kerala based plantations, teak plantations. Okay, post-climax is finally what has happened after the climax stage. Okay, overall, let's say the final evergreen species that we get in the sal forests. Okay, and then there is also something known as subclimax, or let's say biotic climax, known as, or we can see in the sal or the teak forest in general in certain moist localities. Okay, so overall in different forest types we see different types of climax overall, right? Now we come together to one important part here, and then we'll also see the causes, etc. And then we'll move to, I think there's slight issue here in this particular part. Okay, right, these two parts are very important. Okay, so if you are overall watching this, so here we are going to do 4 parts. Theories of succession, there are 4 theories: monoclimax theory, polyclimax theory, information theory, and climate pattern hypothesis. Okay, so what we will do, we'll just try to do this, and for this I'll just give you a short dictation because some of you may not be very much aware. Okay, so we'll write down the heading theories of ecological succession. Okay, one by one we'll try to attempt it. Monoclimax theory, we have the polyclimax theory. There is an information theory which also tells, for example, the certain species have the information to carry out the ecological succession. Okay, and at the end you also have this climax pattern hypothesis. Okay, so first part is to know who gave the theory. Okay, for example, the climax pattern hypothesis was given by Whittaker. Okay, in the information you have this Fosberg and Odom. Okay, the polyclimax theory given by Tansley. Okay, and monoclimax theory given by Clement. And again, just if you remember the name, only the names, you will be able to expand on this, because again these are very much self-explanatory. Okay, so you will be able to do that. So here also for this part, a couple of lines each, just one line each. So in case you do get a question of any of the comprehensive questions, so that you will not be able to miss out on this particular part. Okay, so here just we will write down a couple of, let's say, points related to this particular aspect here. Okay, so just write down the monoclimax theory. Okay, and write down this was given by F.E. Clement, or even Clement would do. Okay, either F.E. Clement. See, from the name it is saying mono means one. Okay, so according to this theory, you can write down, according to this theory only climatic conditions are involved. According to this theory, only climatic conditions are involved in controlling succession. Okay, full stop. This leads to only one type of climax communities. This leads to only one type of climax communities. Okay, second is the polyclimax theory. And see, there are scientists who come in, let's say first theory will be countered and rebutted by the other, then by the other, there will be changes. Now if, for example, if we know Clement had highlighted that there is only one thing that determines, that is the climatic part, the other person will say poly, which means there are multiple things that are to be taken into account. Okay, so here you can write down Tansley argued, in fact Tansley actually had countered the theory of Clement, so you can write down Tansley argued that it is not just the climate, but also edaphic, biotic and topographic So here there is only the climatic factors. Let's say I use another color for better visibility. Here there are only climatic factors. Here climatic can be there, but not limited to climatic. You can also have biotic. You can also have, so here there can only be one type of climax, which is the climatic climax, okay, or that is the climax community based on the climatic type. Here climatic can be there. There can also be biotic climax. There can also be edaphic climax, something we have already seen. So now it will make you easier to understand. Poly means write down all the 4 biotic locality factors, okay, but mention them as climax. And last will be topographic. Okay, that is the part of poly. Okay, right. So next here is information theory proposed by Fosberg, FOS, BERG and Odom. Okay, so here just one line. According to this theory, succession, and this is, see, in when you read in environment ecosystem, you will always see the 2 major functions of an ecosystem are energy flow and nutrient cycling. Okay, so this theory basically highlights how that happens. You can write down, according to this theory, succession is a function of energy balance. So we are writing almost the functions of ecosystem in a different format for you to remember. It's a function of energy balance and nutrient cycling. It's a function of nutrient balance and even energy cycling. Okay, so that you can write down. Now the last part is climax pattern hypothesis. Okay, so here they will talk about that there are many patterns that are available. Okay, so you cannot say that there will be a discrete number of climax community. For example, in monoclimax they say there is a one specific climax, that is climatic climax. In polyclimax they have outlined, but in the climate pattern it can say there can be different types of pattern that can be seen overall. Okay, so this tries to overall give a more comprehensive theory in the climax pattern hypothesis. So here you can write down that climax communities are patterns of population. Climax communities are patterns of population varying according to the environment. Varying according to the environment, full stop. Next, it allows continuity of climax types. It allows continuity of climax types which are varying gradually, gradually with the changing environment. So here only one, here it said okay climate can be there, but still they were isolated. Okay, climate or biotic or this or that. Here it will say it will totally depend, so you can have combination of factors at one. Okay, and this will vary according to the environment. That is the climax pattern hypothesis. So 4 things we have seen so far. There are also other ones. You will not be able to remember all of them. Theories of succession. So these 4 are prominent ones. You can see the name of the scientists also available, right? And this is how you can address and understand this whole part here. Okay, if this part is clear, you can just let me know. Okay, so that is how we understand the theories of succession. Fine. If we have understood the theories of succession, let us go back. So this part, try to again do it, write it with your own hand. Okay, next is the causes of forest succession. Okay, now see, there are 2 ways to present the causes. One of course is this good diagram. See, okay, one, for example, when we say what are the causes of forest succession? Either you can mention it 1, 2, 3, 4. You can write from let's say deforestation, overgrazing, even the issues related to forest fires, okay, or any of these important aspects. So that is one way to present it, where we talk about deforestation, overgrazing, forest fires, or perhaps even the human interventions. But another way to present it, and a more better way, can be this, where we talk about the initiating causes, okay, which will start it, what will continue it, and what will stabilize it. Okay, this is just another way of presentation. So again, these are ways to maximize and again present the information in a better manner. What can be the initiating causes? In fact, soil erosion. Now this soil erosion can be by both wind, it can also be by water, right? Soil erosion by either wind or water. Deforestation can happen, of course, right? Forest fires, volcanoes. Now forest fires also, remember, again we'll see overall that forest fires can be both man-made, it can also be human, it can be natural. But again, according to IUCN, it is around 90% of the forest fires are man-made. 90% of the forest fires are man-made. Okay, so this is again something that you can understand. So volcano, again volcanic eruptions, landslides, etc. These can also trigger or start. These can be the initiating causes. Continuation causes is the several stages. You can again mention the talk about the subclimax here. Okay, that can also be a point. And last is the stabilization causes. Okay, in the stabilization causes, we'll again see the idea in the stabilization causes is to mention how everything here gets overall stabilized. Okay, so that is how we will be presenting it and writing it, right? So again, that is how we will overall talk about this whole part here. Okay, that how the stabilization again overall is going to happen in this part. That is again the part that we discuss. Okay, so that is one. So initiating causes, continuation causes, stabilizing causes, that is one. Now just we'll look at a couple of previous questions. Okay, and before that, again try to remember what is definition, what is the type, what is the causes, initiating, continuating, stabilization, theories, different theories. Okay, in fact stages also, we have also seen the stages. Your diagram, two types of diagram also we've seen here, that will help. Okay, now I think there is a slight issue here, the thank you slide is also there. You may be thinking the session is done, but we have some more time to go. So here now, okay, now I can see the questions here. So let us just have a look at the questions. Okay, what is succession and climax, and give the causes of forest succession. Okay, that is the first question. I'll just read out the question in case if it is not very much visible to you because of this whole part here. First question, what is succession and climax? We've seen that. What are the causes of forest succession? We've also seen that. Another question, define succession, explain different types of succession in detail, citing suitable examples, discuss the various theories, has already been asked as a 15 marker. Now everybody from here will be able to write down what are the theories with the definition. Now imagine this question has many parts. Succession, explain different types of succession, citing suitable examples, and give various theories of succession. Okay, what is subclimax? Okay, explain its importance in the Indian context. Okay, discuss the evolution of the concept of plant succession. Okay, discuss the initial causes of secondary succession, various serial stages, development of Shoria robusta. Okay, so let us take one of these questions for our own understanding, and then we'll try to expand on that. Okay, I think here also one issue has been that maybe you, if in case you're not able to see, also what I'll do. Okay, just let us understand this particular part here. Just give me a second. So the question is related to Shoria robusta here. I think if that part is visible or easily understood. Okay, So let me just outline the question. Discuss the various seral stages of succession leading to development of Shorea robusta. Okay, the question is nice and clear, and let us also see what is to be. Just a second. Okay, now I think this will be visible better. Okay, let me just try to do this once so that one can be see this. Okay. In the meantime, you try to think about this. The question says to us, discuss the various seral stages that are there in the Shorea. Okay, now this is good. Okay, now let us see this. Fine. What are the different seral stages in the Shorea robusta? Fine. Even if you don't know the answer, right now we know you will have a pioneer stage. You have the pioneer species. You can also have a climax stage, the last most stable part. In between you have early seral stage, mid seral stage. You can also have, for example, late seral stage. Okay. So here again we can understand that if you get any of the questions, the question directly, for example, is related to Shorea robusta. So you don't have to get panicked here. First of all, try to think in different steps. Now, pioneer first stage. Okay, here very small, fast growing herbaceous plants, etc. are going to be there. Okay, and we've already seen here if there are small herbs and shrubs. So there can be certain pioneering species. Okay, for example, this Mimosa pudica or even lantana. Okay, lantana is again a shrub, very fast growing shrub. So that is what we'll see, because here the bare rock or the soil is colonized by small growing herbaceous plants or even grasses. Then there's the early seral stage. Okay, so here slowly and slowly establishment is going to happen. Okay, they will try to establish themselves. Better soil conditions will happen here. Early seral stage is going to be present. So here you will see small trees coming up. You will see some shrubs coming up. Example for that can be even, let's say, some of the species of even acacia you can see. Okay, Auriculiformis, that is also something we can have a look at. That in the mid seral stage, establishment of taller trees and a complex community structure. Notice the stages are exactly like we have seen in the previous one. So whatever knowledge you had, try to mold it down and even mention that is going to be good. Okay, there can be some other species in the overall Shorea robusta forest. Okay, maybe other species in that, even the Arjuna species, etc. Other tree species, Cassia fistula, etc. can be present here. In the late seral stages, we can also see, while the Shorea trees will be there themselves, they can also be assisted by certain other species in that area itself. Okay, that is what we see. But here more complexity is going to happen, more stabilization is going to happen. Finally you have the climax stage. Okay, in that you will have, of course, the mature Shorea robusta forest. They will have a closed canopy. Now notice all the keywords: canopy, diverse understory, okay, and a complex network of ecological interactions. Fine. So overall, when we see what are the different seral stages, notice what we've done. We've broken down the question in different parts: pioneer stage, early seral stage, mid seral stage, late seral stage, and finally the the climax stage. Okay, so that is how we have done it, right? Going back to our own part here. Okay, what you understand. So again, let me now condense it so that everything can come at one place. Okay, let's say if I've compressed this even further. Now another question that we were seeing, and can be added to this mind map, was the causes. Okay, what are the causes that you can do? And then you can follow this up. Why? Just see the previous questions now. One previous question we have seen on Shorea robusta and the seral stages in that. Many questions are telling the theories, what are the types of ecological succession, what actually happens here, primary, secondary succession, subclimax, etc. So try to write now questions on them. That is how you will be able to condense all the information that you have had so far. Okay, so that is again what we have seen here in this manner. Stages, I hope now is clear to you. Okay, just a second. Okay, now before we move to the regeneration part here, I think this is one slide I was not able to overall complete once. This is again linked to the site quality. Remember, in site quality we had a slide and we had discussed about why height is going to be considered. Okay, so here just a couple of points related to height, and then just also I'll briefly introduce the regeneration. This is again a very important part for you to understand. Okay, now talking about why height. Okay, so again, how the plant grows is, you can see it, how well it grows through how tall it is. Okay, so height will indicate the growth potential. Okay, so this will depend on if the sunlight is good, if the water, nutrients, all the climatic, topographic, edaphic, biotic factors are fine. That means this will show a good growth potential. How? You'll judge it based on the height. Okay, height of the stands, the height of the overall tree species. Then height can overall give you a uniform measurement. Okay, when we do the mensuration sector, we'll see why DBH is very important, diameter at breast height. So it gives you a standardized and a easily measurable parameter. Okay, that will help you for consistent comparisons across different sites. Although we also know that even there are certain issues with site quality index. Okay, that it cannot be overall, one area cannot be same as the other area. There are certain issues that is also there. Site also gives us a predictive value. We can even predict, because this again calculations have been done for a long time. So now if we measure a height at a base age, it allows the foresters to predict the potential height of trees at various stages. Okay, and if you do that, ultimately this is going to help in informed decisions in forest management. Okay, better silviculture and ultimately better yield. Okay, this is the part we already know, that site index is based on this height. It is a very important quality factor related to the timber production. Okay, what is the species that is going to be selected, what is the management strategy, etc. This is going to be an important part here with respect to the height. That is why you take height, because it is a good indicator of site quality. With site quality, recall site quality index. Fine. Plus you can also compare growth across different tree species. Okay, so height measurements, how do they help you? The height measurements enable direct growth comparisons. Okay, we can directly compare the growth. That also helps between different sites, different factors, soil, so on and so forth. So based on all these factors, it also helps. So again, whatever we have discussed in that part, add this to your knowledge as well. So this is also going to be an overall good part. Okay, so that is one. Okay, so overall this is one thing that we have understood. Now another important topic is regeneration. Remember, in a lot of our lectures we had referenced what is regeneration. Okay, now regeneration, remember, can be both natural and regeneration can also be artificial. I'll show you a very simple mind map. Try to remember and draw it. See, whatever we are showing and doing, it is very easy when you see me doing it, or perhaps when you read a book, etc. But to be able to replicate in the next 50 days in the exam hall will require constant practice. Okay, so whatever you see, don't trust that you will remember it also in the exam hall. Focus more on practice. If you're able to replicate it twice or thrice without looking at it, that means of course then you will be able to do that. Fine. So one is natural regeneration and then other is artificial regeneration. In very simple terms, remember, if we have to discuss what is natural regeneration, think about a forest. Okay, in a forest there is a tree will have certain seeds, the seed falls down. Okay, and because of the seed falling down, then the seed germinates into then overall a tree itself. That simple part is known as natural regeneration. Okay, so natural regeneration, I have given you the example, can happen through seed, okay, which directly falls. However, that seed can also be grown in a nursery, and from a nursery in artificial conditions can also be used. Seedling seed or a seedling, remember. And when I say seed, I hope the part is clear to you. Seed followed by seedling, followed by sapling, followed by pole, and then a saw log. Okay. So when I'm talking of natural regeneration, I'm referring to the seed which directly falls down on the ground. Whereas when I'm saying artificial regeneration, here there can be many other mechanisms. Okay, because here then the part become artificial, right? So here, first of all, just a basic diagram that you can see. Okay. That how can you understand the process of regeneration? Fine. Regeneration can be natural, it can be by seed. When it happens like this, of course you have something known as a high forest, right? Then there is something is known as a vegetative propagation. Okay, so here you can have root suckers. We'll show the image. There is a coppice. For coppice, I think, let me again just have a look at and show you the image here. Okay, this is a tree, normal tree. You cut the tree very close to the base. Can you see here? Now multiple shoots will start to grow from it. Okay, and after a certain point of time, this is ready to be harvested. And when I say certain time, let's say around 7 to 20 years. This is known as coppice. And if the base is slightly taller in size, that is known as pollarding. Okay, so this is coppice. If you see this image, you've cut it. Okay, there is a lot to discuss here, and this is pollarding. Okay, and by the way, this is also, see, whatever terms we use, you should be understanding it. Notice in coppice, A is coppice, and this is pollarding. And by the way, UPSC has asked you multiple times examples of good coppicers, strong coppicers, bad coppicers, examples of which are used in pollarding. In coppicing, note, this is the tree, this was cut down to a very short height. Whereas in pollarding, it is cut down to a large height. That is a direct, obvious method or a way in which we differentiate coppicing and pollarding. Can you see that? In coppicing, it's a very short area where this is done. In pollarding, it's a long area. Okay, so let us go back, okay, to the part here where we are just seeing the diagram, just overall observing what is there. Okay, in now, natural regeneration can happen via seed, also via vegetative propagation through root suckers, coppice or pollarding. Okay, then there is artificial regeneration, which can be, again, you can use vegetative methods, but you can also use micro propagation. Okay, so for that we'll also see the use of tissue culture, etc. So first is to be able to understand this, and again when I go through this one by one, you will be understanding it. Okay, maybe we'll not be able to cover the entire part today here. Okay, but still this will give you a overall good overview about what is to be understood in regeneration. Fine. Second thing is the artificial regeneration. In the artificial regeneration, what we are seeing, examples like vegetative propagation. Okay, here like examples like cutting, budding, grafting, and even on that, types of graft questions have been asked by in the Indian Forest Service exam. So I'll write the previous year question here. Even budding, different budding, bud chip, etc. And then you have micro propagation. So the very first part that you have to know is just to understand this segregation. Okay, in the segregation, what we are seeing, you have a concept known as regeneration. Very first thing that you see here, it can be natural, it can be artificial. In natural can be by seeds, so first we will see about seeds. However, it can also be vegetative. By the way, artificial can also be vegetative, and artificial can also be, you can have something known as micro propagation. So there are two things, macro and micro. This is a part of macro. Micro is again when we go into the tissue part. Okay, let's say you are talking about the tissue propagation related. Seed is one. So again in vegetative part we can talk about vegetative propagation. Let's say root suckers, coppice, and by the way, coppice systems and coppice with standards, coppice with reserves is also a part that you see again in paper 1A itself in silviculture systems. Okay, and one is pollarding. And of course here we'll talk about it slightly later. So let us first go ahead and start here. Overall, just let us define for ourselves what is natural regeneration. When the natural regeneration happens by seeds, there are so many different factors that are taken into account. Okay, for example, if you get a question, what are the factors for successful natural regeneration? There are certain things I'll tell you. Okay, successful. Okay, and then how can you improve this? What can be done? Then by COPIs, so on and so forth. We'll see certain good examples here one by one. Has been asked many a times. Okay. So let us talk about this one by one, and before we do so, let me just have a sip of water. Okay, so by now I think if you can overall understand, if you're drawing this, you can draw this diagram overall so far. Cutting, budding, grafting, micropropagation. That is what you can write. Okay, now let me continue. So we are talking of natural regeneration, right? Here focus on the keywords. It is a very important process in forestry. Here the self renewal of forests happen. How does it happen? Establishment and growth of new trees, vegetation, without the direct human intervention. Okay, so without even directly intervening it, this is how this is going to happen. One. Okay. Now, because when this process happens, notice there is a focus on natural part. Okay, in artificial, of course, we cannot exactly mimic the stand dynamics. We cannot exactly mimic the canopy, the composition. So here, this process mimics the natural dynamics of the ecosystem. Okay, which helps in overall. It allows nature to in the replenishment. Okay, so that also helps. Natural regeneration, how does it happen? Of course, when I'm saying seeds, seeds can be dispersed by wind, by water, by different pollination agents, animals, etc. Okay, so this is how you can talk about. So wind, water, animals, other means. Okay, and they can, the seeds can find their own microhabitats, and based on those microhabitats, they can begin to grow. Okay, and of course, that is how the new forest vegetations will come in. Okay. Now, when the natural vegetation will happen via seeds, all these factors will come into account. Okay, there can be right from the this part production, dissemination, germination. Okay, establishment, climatic factors, edaphic, biotic, genetic. All these factors will play an important role when the natural generation happens by a seed. In fact, all these processes that you see. There is also a topic in silviculture itself where we talk about seeds, seed supply, etc. There also we'll see seed production, dissemination, germination, establishment. But here remember we are talking from a natural regeneration point of view. Okay, that the natural, I should add here, from a natural regeneration point of view by seeds. Okay, so if the question is, and let us now discuss it, what are the factors for successful natural regeneration? Okay, so here again I'll talk about many factors one by one, and again those of you here, before I discuss this, let me just pose the question. You think about certain factors and then we'll discuss. Okay, the question I'm posing to you, like we had seen, what are the factors or what are the successful factors for reintroduction or introduction of exotics? Now my question is, what are the factors for successful natural regeneration? Here also, what is the cheat code for us? The cheat code is climatic, biotic, topographic and environmental overall factors, right? So here one by one we'll see that, and we'll also see how can you make the answer better. Fine. Overall, I think I have around 12-13 points to discuss with you. So we'll have a look at this, followed by how can natural regeneration be improved. So this also we'll have a look at. Fine. Now, the very first thing is seed source and quality. Okay. So a viable, notice the keyword here, the very first thing is a viable, because this is what is going to help in reproduction. We need a viable seed source that is essential for forest regeneration. It should be viable, number one. Seed, if it is from a healthy mature tree of a desired species in a proper number, that is going to help. That is why we said viable. Again remember, when we talk about, let's say, reintroduction of cheetah, we always say what is the viable population, because that is going to ensure the continuity of that species. Okay. So healthy mature trees we would want available in sufficient quantity, plus good quality, free from pest, disease, damage. This is very much needed. This is going to enable better germination and growth, otherwise the growth will be hampered. Okay. What are the conditions in the microsite? Okay. Now here these terms you already now know: light, availability, soil type, moistures, temperature. So what is this overall? We are talking about climatic factors. But you should be able to break down, let's say you write climatic factors, break it down into these parts: light, okay, soil, moisture, etc., so on and so forth. Then competition management. Competition is again a part related to the biotic, because if in a young stage the seed is going to compete with for all the resources. Okay. So controlling competition from existing vegetation, grasses, shrubs, invasive species is important. So they get the space, they get the light, they get the nutrients to grow. Okay, that is important. Then even sometimes the natural disturbances can create openings and favorable conditions. Okay, so be it some animal activity, be it certain fire or windstorms, so they can sometimes help. Okay, so we should have appropriate knowledge of these factors here, and in this also is included a part of biotic also. So when I say animal activity, how sometimes in the seed propagation this may help. Okay, in seed dispersal, etc. Predator and herbivore management, this again is a biotic factor. Okay, so again herbivores, what they'll do overgrazing. So whatever seeds they will start to germinate and grow, they may eat it up. You want to protect that, right? So and their predators, they can harm the seedlings. Okay, so whatever repellents we may want to use, fencing, etc., that can be there. Composition. Okay, so here also if we overall go for a diverse mix of native species, remember in exotic part also we said diverse mix. You don't want to go for monoculture plantations, because in monoculture if any one strand, if any one area gets a disease, the entire strand may get a problem. Okay, so what species, the species specific knowledge you should also have. That is why species specificity is also a very important part. Okay, so that is important here. Other than that, the silviculture or the treatment practices, so be it thinning, creation of a gap in the canopies, etc., for better light management, light penetration, can also help overall. So this also is a part. See, so most of the part, again I'm going slowly through this part here. Again, if you understand this in the very initial lectures and when you absorb this, your whole understanding about these part is going to be very much very much advanced. Fine. Similarly, now you understand that how climate and weather will play a very important role. Okay, temperature, moisture levels. Now I don't need to explain this part again, right? Because this is going to be very crucial for survival of seedlings. Okay, understanding, now this is again a core. We understand what are the type of species that are to be planted. We should also understand the natural reproductive cycles the species may have. Okay, so which means what is the cycle for the target trees, so that you understand what is the optimal time for seed collection, for seed germination and seed sowing. This also is important. Okay, then even monitoring and adaptive management also has to be done. This will ensure, see, we are concerned with this part successful. That is why you need to know the microsite, you need to know everything. What is the time period, when should the seed be sowed, planted, harvested, so on and so forth, right? If you regularly monitor the sites for regeneration, for assessing the seedlings health, okay, growth, survival, this also would help. Fine. Again, if the regeneration gaps, etc., challenges are identified, we can do adaptive management. In fact, there is also a term known as silvicultural adaptive management. Okay, wherein whatever problems are coming in, based on that we try to recourse them, we try to address those problems. That also helps, right? Seed dispersal mechanisms. Okay, so again we should understand, we also saw this part here, by wind, by water, by animal. That is by understanding the workings of predators, herbivores, overall animal behavior is important here. Correct. Now ecosystem connectivity. So again, as we move and we become more advanced, okay, so here if we are able to create connectivity between different ecosystems or different patches of forests, that will help. Okay, so here be it seed, pollen, wildlife, etc., in this contribution this will help. Fine. And last point is where we add the part of human or the socio-economic angle. The socio-economic angle here is basically suggesting indigenous practices and local practices. Okay, so even if we talk about the natural, what are the factors which affect the successful natural regeneration, so here we are saying understanding of site specific regeneration requirements. In the previous lecture also, remember, there was a term that was known as site specific planning. So here also in this question we are again saying we have to know specifics of species, specifics of site, individually, climate, edaphic, topographical, all these factors. And in addition to this, paper 2A, that is the forest management part, where we talk about things like adaptive management. Okay, a combination of all these factors will ensure successful natural regeneration. Okay, a combination of all these factors, of course, this will ensure successful natural regeneration. I hope till here you are able to follow. Okay, factors for successful natural regeneration. And again, this is a question where you can just try to write to again improve your understanding about what we have just discussed. Okay, so again that will overall help you to again be able to write this part better. Okay, so that is one. Okay, how can the natural regeneration be improved? Okay, so same points that you've seen you can again add. That is how you can improve it. When you know about the topographical factors, the better biotic factors, these are the 4 common points. Climatic factors, okay, edaphic, but in addition to this, think about site specific planning, okay, species specific, then integration of local indigenous knowledge, okay, and then of course let's say advanced or overall management. This is how. So again 8 points you will always have with you, just like we saw adaptive management. So you can talk about adaptive management here also. Just a second. Adaptive management, right? So this is again how we have discussed this, and we can write points related to this whole part here. Okay, now here just to enhance it further, there are a couple of things you can write down. Okay, so here just first point. So in India, because we've given the example of sal multiple times, so you can write down in India sal, that is Shoria robusta. In India, the sal forests, the successful natural regeneration depends on, for sal forests, successful natural regeneration depends on presence of sufficient mother trees with high quality seeds. Okay, plus we can also say you need to have good genetic diversity in the parent stand also. That is why we are saying presence of sufficient, first of all, adequate number of trees should be there with high quality seeds. Okay, similarly, for example, now how can you use your knowledge? We said controlling competition from existing vegetation using grasses, shrubs and invasive species. You have to control invasive species. What can be an invasive species? For example, if I give you example of, let's say we take the example of Karnataka, okay, Bandipura. So here lantana removal is again a very important part which will make this successful. This you already know. but you link it and then you write it. So you can write down one line. Okay, you can write down in Western Ghats, controlling land tenure. In Western Ghats, controlling land tenure is crucial for successful natural regeneration of native species. The parts again which I am dictating, these are very important. All the words, lines you have to write. Okay. In the Western Ghats, controlling land tenure is crucial for successful natural regeneration of native species. Now, I think I mentioned the natural disturbances right here. Natural disturbances like fire, wind, storm. Okay. Now we also have read that sometimes forest fire is also useful. Can we give an example? Yes, we can give an example. Write down. I'll give you example of the Chir pine or overall the forest in Uttarakhand. You can write. In Chir pine, by now I'm expecting you to write Pinus roxburghi. Pinus roxburghi. In Chir pine, that is Pinus roxburghi, forests of Uttarakhand. Controlled burning is sometimes used to prepare. Controlled burning is sometimes used to prepare seeds or seed beds for natural regeneration. Okay. In fact, one more point we can add to here is appropriate silviculture system. Okay. So again, when we talk, and you will also see, for example, clear felling system, selection system, shelter wood system, that also can be a point. Selection of appropriate silviculture system would also improve the viability or the regeneration of that certain species, right? So these two parts, improving the natural regeneration and factors for successful, we have been able to understand. Okay. Then we move to this part here, coppice, and I think we'll complete it till here, and we'll see this natural regeneration by coppice. Okay. And then these parts we'll see at a later point of time. So now, very first thing is, if you ever got a question on coppice, you have to draw a diagram. Draw before. Okay, so a general tree before the coppicing. In coppicing, what you have done, you are cutting it very close to its base. Cutting close to the base in winters is what is done here. Following spring, what is done? So again, shoots or multiple shoots will start to emerge, and 7 to 20 years later, the coppice is ready to be harvested. Okay. What is coppice is something we had already seen, but again remember, we are talking about this part here. First of all, coppicing. Okay. So here one line maybe you can write down. Okay. First, it is a method of sustainable wood management to provide the wood resources. Okay. Second, many trees, when they are cut very close to the base, to the stump, they can again regrow. So that is what is done. So coppice takes advantage of the fact that certain trees can make new growth from a stump if a tree is cut down. So in this case, what you are seeing, the tree is being cut down, and based on that, of course, we see the regeneration, etc., start to happen. So here a diagram, again I am saying, is a must. You should draw the diagram. Okay. Now this side, this is something very important. I want you to manually write it down, because this is a question every year you will get to see. Okay. For example, again, if I go back, if you see, we are seeing the previous year questions. Fine. Now again, question directly has been asked in a compulsory part. If you see here, write down the botanical name of 3 tree species: non-coppicer, poor coppicer, good coppicer, and strong coppicer. Okay. Almost every year you will see a question on coppice, so why not prepare it? here itself. Fine. So here of course cutting is happening, okay, from the main stem 20 to 30 centimeters from the ground level. Strong copicers example can be Acacia catechu, number 1, Albizia lebec, okay, Acacia catechu, Albizia lebec, and even Anognesis, latifolia. We'll also see Delbergia latifolia, etc. Here you are saying Anognesis latifolia. These are all strong copicers. And in the exam also all these 4 things had been asked. Okay, this is generally how we prepare this part. Good copicers can be, you have Asculus indica, Hardwickia binata. By the way, Hardwickia binata we'll also see later on, and this Chloroxylon sweetenia. Chloroxylon sweetenia. This should be your homework, that by the end of this lecture you should remember these parts. Again, whatever we had seen, shade demander, light demander has been asked multiple times. This has been asked multiple times. Try to remember it. What are bad copicers? Adena cordifolia, Bombax seba. And non-copicers can be all conifers. We have seen multiple examples, be it oak or the junipers or the populous species, Pinus roxburghi, okay, the cheer pines, etc. Okay, or even AB spindro, etc. You can mention all them in conifers. So non-copicers will be all conifers. Bad, and by the way, conifers were, we had seen angiosperms and gymnosperms. So gymnosperms were your conifers. Non-copicers are conifers. Bad copicers, Adena cordifolia, Bombax seba. Good copicers, let's say Asculus indica, Chloroxylon sweetenia, Hardwickia binata. Strong copicers, Acacia catechu, Albizia lebec, okay, Anognesis latifolia. All these are examples related to the different copicers. This is something we cannot miss out. Okay, easy marks we'll get here. Okay, so natural regeneration by copicing is one. Again, a basic diagram is what you have seen. Here again a diagram you should write and draw and write down. What are the types of copice? Simple copice, copice with standards. Okay, there is also copice with reserves. There is a group copice, selection copice, temporary copice, and pollard copice. Write this down just once. This is a part one. We also see this in silviculture systems, but just the types of copicing you should also know here. What are the different types of copicing? Okay, and then we'll overall end the class for today with a small discussion on the factors affecting copicing. Okay. So what we've seen, simple copice, a copice with standards. We'll also see how the copice, the variation, etc. keeps on happening in different types of copice. First of all, just for reference, we'll write this down. Okay, simple copice, copice with standards, group copice, collections, temporary, and a pollard copice. Okay, and the last heading that we'll have a look at is the factors which are affecting the copice. Okay, so just put down the heading, the factors which are affecting the copice. Okay, so here if I just draw a simple mind map. Okay, so some things you already know. The conditions of the site. Here also biotic factors, condition of stump, because stump is a major part here. I can even add to this, for example, even which season, for example, which silviculture system are we going for. Okay, some of the general factors that we can talk about. Okay, right. For stump, you can just write down this as stump characteristics, which is a better keyword here. Okay, silviculture systems, or even the kind of treatments, silvicultural treatments that keep on happening. Okay, this by season I mean in which season the felling was carried out. Okay, the season of felling. Okay, all these are the factors which are going to affect the copicing, so keep that in mind. Now here there are a couple of points that I want you to write down. Okay, that so that we understand this part better, right? And I think one part I can also add here, which is again an important part overall, is the species itself. The very important part, start with the species in fact, because it is the age of the species, the ability of the species to copice, which is also an important factor. Okay, in many cases we assume that to be a constant, but of course let us take that also as a separate part. So here when you have certain different kind of species, right, strong copicer, good copicer, bad copicer, so I'll take species as a separate part, and then all these factors I'll make you write down. Only the keywords have to be there in the answer. Write down species, just the keywords. Three things: inherent copicing ability for the species, the inherent copicing ability, age of the tree. Second point is age of the tree. And third is vigor of the parent tree. Third is vigor of the parent tree. Vigor of the parent tree. The best way to illustrate is to give the previous example. Some trees are good copicers, some are not. So here just write down. In India, Tectona grandis and Shorea robusta. In India, Tectona grandis and Shorea robusta are known for good copicing ability. Whereas cheer pine, which we just saw, Pinus roxburghi for example, whereas cheer pine do not copice, whereas this does not copice. Okay, that is one. Second, we'll talk about the stump characteristics. Here just simple, the height of the stump, stump height, diameter. Okay, these are important points. Then let's say if I talk about the site conditions. Okay, here you already know the fertility of the soil, so fertility, soil fertility is an important part, soil moisture, availability of light. Okay, you can even add within the site conditions or another fact related to climatic factors. Okay, because these are, again, we have done this in good detail, so you know rainfall, temperature, frost. This will also be have a bearing on the affecting the copicing. Okay, so this is there. Biotic factors also are important. Okay, so here insect attacks, invasive species, grazing pressures, cutting down, etc., forest, etc., all the biotic factors are important. When the season of felling is, here also we'll write one example so that you remember. All of these points will make your answer stand out. So season of felling, in this you can write down in just one line: in many parts of India, felling for copice regeneration, is done during the dormant season, that is the winter season, is done during the dormant season to maximize the sprouting potential. To maximize the sprouting potential. Okay, that can be written and mentioned here. Okay, now in this I'll give you one good example. For example, when we say the silviculture system and treatment, we basically are saying how the felling is being done. Okay, the people who are doing it, are they trained, are they overall given some overall understanding in this particular part? Okay, so here just one point you can write. Okay, for example, in silviculture treatments, etc., we are talking of, let's say, thinning operations if they are done, etc. Okay, minimizing the bark damage. So write down minimizing bark damage, tool selection. Okay, so here just one example. In the community managed forests of Odisha, in the community managed forests of Odisha, in the community managed forests of Odisha, training programs have been conducted. Training programs have been conducted for. Training programs have been conducted to improve local felling techniques. To improve local felling techniques for better coppice regeneration. For better coppice regeneration. For better coppice regeneration. Okay. So this is what we wanted to discuss. The other parts can be taken up later on. Okay. So today just overall we had an idea about the natural regeneration and the basics around it. Okay. The factors that will help in better natural regeneration. In addition to this, we see coppicing, we see seed, we have also seen forest succession in good detail. We also saw certain previous year questions along with good examples. So again, your basic homework has to be to write these down. Okay. Theories of succession, for example, subclimax, overall these mind maps that we discussed. Okay, the different factors that are involved for exotics, plantations, all the examples that we saw. Regulation of solar radiation is a powerful tool for the forester. So make sure you write these down. The more you write, the better it is going to be for you. Okay. So with that, I'll take your leave for today. If you have any doubts, okay, if you have any issues, you can again reach out. Okay, you can again either, if you're present in Delhi for 2024, 2025, etc., you can directly reach out to the offline center. You can contact me. We can talk about and discuss. For the people writing 2024 exam, again, you can just drop a message to 93191 78775, where we also have a dedicated group for the people writing the 2024 mains of Indian Forest Services. Okay, and additionally, if you have any doubt, you can just reach out for any assistance that is there. Okay. So overall, wishing all of you all the best. Please keep on revising. Hopefully we'll meet soon, very shortly. Thank you.